perhaps we all benefit from information from you guys. You watch this here, right? You see? Are you ready? No, you see. Oh, no, it's not. No, you see over somebody in high school. That's a good position to play. Yeah. It's a good competition to play. I remember you teaching us. You were like from 9 o'clock to all of this, and then you go down, you go like this. Remember our house? And then you're throwing those fast balls at it? Yeah, I still remember it. So that's one of the real things. No, it's probably the most important one. So I think all has to get that. Yeah. But I don't know. I didn't we won last time. So. And it's because of my contribution. Did your brother okay? Tomorrow, I told him to come. I don't know if he wants to. But I told him to come. Yes, sir. But I didn't see it, but if you go to push-ups, then. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if they like weight set that can change it. Yeah, yeah.
All right, assalamu alaikum guys. Inshallah, we're going to start in 1 minute. Please come to your seats. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I begin in the name of Almighty Allah. I invoke His peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I ask Allah to extend His blessings to the Prophet's family, his companions and their followers, and the men and women that walk in their footsteps. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among them. Allahumma ameen. Brothers and sisters, Jazakumullahu khair for being with us tonight, whether here physically in person or on the live broadcast. This is the Tafseerah program in which we study the commentary on the surahs of the Quran alongside the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. So we study both, and this enables us to look at the surahs at the time of the revelation, at the time they came down upon the Messenger ﷺ, and the historical context in which they were revealed, and how this informs our understanding of the surahs and the application of those surahs today. And so we kind of hit two birds with the same stone. We get to study the Quran, but we also get to study seerah as well. Hence, Tafseerah, play on words, putting the two words together if you are here for the first time. And tonight, inshallah, we are on the second surah in the Madani period. I said before that the Quran was revealed over two time periods. One is the Meccan period, which is the first 13 years of the prophetic mission, and basically 9 to 10 years, almost 10 years after in the Madani period, before the Prophet ﷺ passed away. And the first surah that was revealed in the Madani period is Surat al-Mutaffifin. I said that Surat al-Mutaffifin acted as the introduction, acted as the prelude for that period, that any type of transaction, you have to commit yourself to the terms of that transaction, and everyone needs to basically leave the transaction fulfilled and satisfied. No one has the right to scam another. And this applies to business transactions, but it also applies to basically all the other interactions of life as well. And we extensively talked about the concept of tatfif, from which the word al-mutaffifin comes. And last time we started Surat al-Baqarah. And we said the Surat al-Baqarah is going to take us a while, obviously, to cover, because this is the longest, the weightiest, the heaviest, the most layered surahs of the Quran. Surah al-Baqarah is filled with teachings, with injunctions. It is filled with lessons, rules, regulations, and it's going to take us quite a bit of time. Hopefully, inshallah, not a year, but it'll take us a bit of time to cover everything that is necessary to cover, in this surah. And one of the things that we always try to do here at the Tafseerah program is to work together in order to develop a theme for every surah. Because once we know that theme, and once we realize that this theme works extremely well with the historical context of the surah itself, it becomes much easier to understand. It becomes much easier to kind of figure things out about the surah. So, Surah al-Baqarah, in the order of revelation, is the surah that came right after the prelude or the introduction, which essentially makes it, the first chapter in the Madani Quran, right? If we count al-Mutaffifin as the introduction. That makes Surah al-Baqarah basically chapter 1 in that new journey, in this book that is about to be written. And that tells us a lot, because it also indicates that what Surah al-Baqarah is going to teach us is something that will apply in the backdrop of the Madani experience throughout. And the historical record shows that. I said that most of the surah, maybe about 75% of it or a little bit more, was revealed in the first year. And then the rest of the surah was actually revealed over the next 9 years, including the very last ayah in the Quran that was revealed weeks before the Prophet ﷺ passed away. And that again tells us that Surah al-Baqarah is not just one other surah that was revealed, but rather it defines the spirit of the Madani period. It was always there. Other surahs are being revealed, but Surah al-Baqarah is the one that everyone sort of anticipates. Now that is the order of revelation. Now the order of collection, if you get the Mus'haf from the shelves and you open it up, it is interesting because Surah al-Baqarah is also the surah that comes after the introduction, right? And so Surah al-Fatiha comes first, and Surah al-Fatiha is the intro to the Quran. This is the prelude to the Quran. And then Surah al-Baqarah comes right after that, almost serving the same purpose as it served in the order of revelation. Okay? Again, it's technically chapter 1 after the introduction, and with that, it must have the very definition of the spirit of this ummah. Right? It must have the directives. It must have the primary goals. And so as the Muslims performed their hijrah, and the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims came to Medina, he received al-Mutaffifin. That was the introduction. And now the real meat is coming down in Surah al-Baqarah. And Surah al-Baqarah basically defines the Madani period. It gives the Muslims the directives. It gives them their mission. It gives them their tasks as they are about to embark upon the Madani period. And the Madani period, unlike the Meccan period was more about survival. It was more about preserving the faith. It's more about the core, right? But the Madani period is about the blossoming of the faith. It's about the growth. It's about building that civilization that is supposed to impact the world. So we should naturally predict, and we would not be wrong, that Surah al-Baqarah will bear within its teachings the essential elements, the essential ingredients and components that are necessary and needed for the prophetic community to be able to build their own civilization, right? And so it has the directives that are needed for the initial community of Muslims, the Muhajirin and the Ansar, that were with the Prophet ﷺ. But by extension, right, Surah al-Baqarah also bears the same directives for the Ummah of Muhammad ﷺ throughout. I think it is also natural for us to make that determination. But with that, I think it would not be an exaggeration to assume that if Surah al-Baqarah has the directives of the original community, and if Surah al-Baqarah has the directives overall of the Ummah in general, then it probably has the directives for us as a community, for us as families, for us as individuals. And so if you ask, okay, at the very, very core level, after all the basic things, after all the introductory things, God put us on this earth to worship Him and all this good stuff, what is my mission then? Okay, what is my mission? After establishing that I'm here to honor and celebrate and glorify the Lord, what then is my mission right after that? That question is answered in Surah al-Baqarah, and we will talk about that further tonight, inshallah ta'ala, right? Surah al-Baqarah, again, it's chapter 1, technically, chapter 1 in the collection, chapter 1 in Revelation in the Madani period. Surah al-Baqarah, as I mentioned last time, is a surah that protects from shaitan. And so the Prophet ﷺ instructed us to recite Surah al-Baqarah at home as frequently as possible. I did mention this last time. Surah al-Baqarah is the surah that intercedes on your behalf on the day of judgment. It speaks to the Lord on your behalf. We've always had this assumption that it is only the Messenger ﷺ that intercedes, that does shafa'ah, right? But I've demonstrated to you that if you have a son or a daughter that have memorized the Quran, that have become huffaz, they will also intercede on your behalf, and you will be elevated on the day of judgment as a result of their good work. But it is also true that the Prophet ﷺ taught us that Surah al-Baqarah and Ali Imran intercede on behalf of the believer on the day of judgment, the one that used to memorize them, the one that used to take from those surahs and read them and follow them in their lives, and lived by that honor. He's exploring. We also said that we also said that Surah al-Baqarah is a surah that the Prophet ﷺ used in order to gather the righteous, brave, courageous warriors around him. You know, when in the thick of battle, he would basically say, "Ayna ahlu Surah al-Baqarah?" Where are the people of Surah al-Baqarah? I mean, the assumption here is that if you belong to Surah al-Baqarah, if you've taken from Surah al-Baqarah in your life, in times when times get rough, you'll be strong enough to stand your ground, right? That is what the Prophet ﷺ did, alayhi salatu wassalam. So Surah al-Baqarah was revealed at the cusp of that journey, right? The journey to build an Islamic civilization, the journey to bring something to the world that would change it forever. And at the very core of that civilization was the state that was going to be basically the stepping stone of that civilization. And again, the anchor of this surah, everything that I've said so far, I'm not making it up. When I say that Surah al-Baqarah gave us the directives, okay? It gave the directives of the original community, the directives of the ummah, the directives of every community that will come thereafter, okay? And that too comes from the ayah in Surah al-Baqarah when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the angels, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. I am sending a trustee of mine on earth. I am sending a vicegerent of mine on earth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, to the angels. And again, I mentioned this briefly last time, that the angels asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Lord, why would you send someone that would spread mischief and do bad things on earth? They were not questioning God. They were just concerned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sidelined them and marginalized them, and now He plans to appoint someone else to worship Him. And so they just wanted to make sure that they haven't done anything wrong, right? Lord, if we've done something wrong, please let us know. Otherwise, we're not concerned. If you want to appoint Adam, go for it, as long as that does not mean you're looking at us differently, right? So, inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. I will appoint a trustee of mine on earth. That word right there, Khalifa, that is the word, the key word of Surah al-Baqarah, the word Khalifa. Because Khalifa tells you what it is that God expects you to do and be on the face of this earth. Being God's Khalifa, being His trustee, being His vicegerent, means that you are doing God's work on this earth. Means that there is more to be done than just worshiping Allah. Okay? The angels were doing that. Remember, here's the trick. The angels already worshipped God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted someone on earth to do more than worship. Definitely worship. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Right? But the concept of ibadah here extended, as I said last time, into imaratul ard. To cause the earth to thrive. To cause the earth to thrive. Okay? Not just exist. Not just consume the resources of this earth, not just eat and drink and procreate and have fun and go to the movies and drink and laugh and go shopping. Okay? There is more to our presence on this earth. And it's not just about sitting at the masjid and praying and worshiping and reading the Quran all day long either. And it's not just about working very hard and diligently and making money and income. And it's not just about inventing and getting patents done, right? It is about understanding that I'm a trustee of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this earth, and that my responsibility is to cause the earth to thrive. Now, who came up with the goal, causing the earth to thrive? Whose goal is that? Is it my goal? Who came up with it? Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have asked us to do other things. But He said, I want you to cause the earth to thrive, to be the reason for the earth to thrive. Now, does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send the angels to achieve that goal? Does He? He does not. Who is supposed to achieve the goal of the Creator? Us. Us. And so it's almost like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the architect of that plan. He's the architect of that plan. He's the one that said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just to give you an analogy, and of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above all of our analogies, so we're not approximating anything here, but sometimes when you use an analogy, it makes it a little bit simple. So, for example, you're a wealthy person, and then you go to a developer and you say, I would like a masjid to be built in the name of my family, and I want this masjid to focus on helping and supporting the poor in the community. Okay? Where does the directive come from? It comes from the wealthy family, right? Who is supposed to execute the directive? It's not the wealthy family. Like, he's not going to bring his cousins and his kids in order to go build the masjid themselves. He's asking a group of people, probably a contractor, a developer, engineers and architects and workers and laborers in order to do the work for him. At the very end of the day, when the masjid is complete, we would say that this masjid exists because of the man that gave the directive, number one, and the people that eventually built it. Which means that the final product is shared. The final product is shared between the giver of the directive and the executor of that directive. You think of this dunya in the same way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gave the directive. But who ultimately needs to execute the command of God? It is us. It is us. There's a shared responsibility. There's a shared credit, so to speak. Okay? And so if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has in His own will for us to be the executors of that will on this earth, and for us to follow the command, the directive of causing the earth to thrive, and I will talk about that in a second, a little bit at length, then it is our responsibility to actually make it happen. It is our responsibility to actually make it happen. If you're, you've watched the videos before, in a automobile, in the automobile industry, like let's say it's BMW, and you're at the BMW factory, and it's the assembly line, all right? There's so many people that are involved in the process. There is the designer that designed the car. There is the engineer that put the motor and the engine together. There is the guy that does the paint. There is the person that installs the parts and the seats and everything. There is the laborer that puts the tires. There is the other engineer that tests the car and so forth. I actually visited the BMW factory in Munich, a few years ago, and it was absolutely fascinating to see the car from beginning to end, on the assembly line. It was a very, very cool experience, right? But I imagine in my own mind that every person that is involved in the process takes partial credit in the final product. Wouldn't you agree? Like the painter would say, yeah, I painted that gray. And the guy that installed the seats, yeah, I put those really nice cushiony leather seats inside. And the engineer that designed the engine will say, yeah, that engine is mine, it has my name on it, actually, right? And the guy that designed the chassis will say, and I designed the chassis. But remember, who made the decision to produce the car in the first place? It's the BMW CEO, right? It's the leadership. So who eventually, the leadership by itself, they did not produce the car with their own hands, they just gave the word, right? The engineer by himself, won't do it on his own. The laborer by himself won't do it on his own. It is the collective effort of all these together that produce the final product. Surat al-Baqarah tells you that a civilization that is centered around God on this earth, a God-centric civilization, a civilization of morals, of values, of principles, a civilization of inspiration, a civilization that imparts goodness on the hearts of men and women, takes its directives from God, but it is constructed through the hands of man. That's what Surah al-Baqarah is trying to say. Causing the earth to thrive is shared agency between us and the Creator. Allah gives the order, and we are the executors of that order. It is not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is incapable of doing it on His own. That's He created the universe. He can, kun fayakun, be and it is, and suddenly there is a thriving civilization on this earth. But that's not what Allah wanted. It's not up to us to decide. Well, why didn't God just do it by Himself? Well, okay, He didn't. And that should be enough. That was not the intent of the Creator. The intent of the Creator was to get us to do it for Him, for the wisdom that He has in His own essence, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He wanted us to do His work, which means many important things. It means the person that lives on this earth and is not directly engaged in the execution of God's plan is a leech. What are you doing here? Breathing God's air and eating His food and occupying space, consuming resources. Where is your part on the assembly line? The architect and the engineer and the laborer and the cushion guy, everyone is doing their part. What are you doing? No, I'm just quality control. I taste the cake afterwards. Like some people are like this. They don't mind, being this self-appointed quality control guy, just kind of plucking the fruits, enjoying everything without actually participating in the production of that fruit. All right? So Surah al-Baqarah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً, I will establish a vicegerent on earth. I will establish a trustee, a representative of my interests. I want you to do the work that I ask you to do, right? So Surah al-Baqarah teaches us that imaratul ard, causing this earth to thrive, is a shared responsibility, right? The directive comes from God and the execution comes from us. This is really important because it'll help us understand why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called it al-Baqarah, right? So keep that in mind, and we're going to get to it inshallah ta'ala in just a few minutes, a couple of minutes here. All right. So again, what have we established so far? That Surah al-Baqarah has the pivot, it has the center, it has the anchor, which is إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. I'm establishing a vicegerent or a trustee on earth. We also said that Surah al-Baqarah is the defining spirit of building an Islamic civilization because of the timing of its revelation and because of its location in the book, in the Quran itself. It is chapter 1 in the Madani period. It is chapter 1 in the book after the introduction. We also saw that Surah al-Baqarah has one of the weightiest ayat in the Quran, okay, and that is ayatul kursi, which is the ayah that glorifies Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in such beautiful ways, like unprecedented in human language. You know what? The other ayah in the Quran that is not as beautiful but is close to ayatul kursi in its beauty is the ayah in Surah An-Nur, Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. This, sometimes you come across these ayat that truly impart the glory of God in your heart, and it leaves you breathless. It leaves you speechless because you read the ayat and you're like, man, I did not think that human beings are capable of producing such powerful words, right? We've produced poetry, we've produced prose, we've produced great literary works, but then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses our own language in order to produce something that shocks us. Is the most incredible thing, as you read this in the Quran, right? And so I left last time with the question, why al-Baqarah? Why the cow? What is the significance? This is Surah al-Baqarah, again, is the surah of these laws, these rules, these regulations, stories, lessons, principles, values, directives that are about building a civilization. Al-Baqarah? Really? Like, of all things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala names it after a cow? What is the thing with this cow, right? And some of you volunteered last time and made really inspiring references to why they think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called it al-Baqarah and so forth. And I actually agree with most of your perspectives, but I wanted to add something else tonight that will enrich the conversation a little bit and make it, slightly more profound, inshallah. So, Surat al-Baqarah, and I will talk about this extensively next time. There's no time tonight to give you the actual classification of the topics in the surah. So I will do this next time. Hopefully we'll cover the classifications next time, and then the session after, inshallah, we will delve into the surah itself. But one of the things in the classification that I will talk to you about is that if Surah al-Baqarah is about how to build a civilization, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually starts with 3 stories about how civilizations are built. The story of Adam alayhi salam, the story of the Hebrews, and the story of Ibrahim. Right? The story of Adam alayhi salam gives you how civilizations are built from scratch, like literally you have absolutely nothing. Okay? And the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam tells you how civilizations are built upon the remnants of previous civilizations. And we'll talk about this extensively over the next few weeks. The story of the Hebrews tells you about what not to do if you really plan to build a civilization. All right? These are the mistakes that you're supposed to avoid. So the successful examples, the successful models, that of Adam alayhi salam as the first man, and that of Ibrahim alayhi salam and the civilization that was built in his wake. But then the Hebrews and the story of Bani Israel in general is about the mistakes that you are supposed to avoid. Okay? What not to do if you are interested in building a civilization. So a part of that story, deep in the middle of the story of the Hebrews, there is, ayat 67 to 71. 4. From 67 to 71, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the story. I'm not going to talk, inshallah, when the time comes and we delve into the story of the Hebrews, I'll talk about this at length with more detail. But I want to just give you the highlights tonight, all right? Because we need to understand why the surah is named al-Baqarah, right? So in ayah number 67, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, what Musa alayhi salam said to his people. وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تَذْبَحُوا بَقَرَةً. Musa alayhi salam went to his people and he says, the Lord instructs you to offer a cow as a sacrifice, to slaughter a cow. You guys are familiar with this story, right? What is the background here? Let me talk to you briefly about the background story, and we might get into some more details when the time comes for this one, inshallah ta'ala. So here's what happened. So a man from the Hebrews was murdered. Okay, so they literally woke up in the morning, this guy is dead. And it's clear that he did not die from natural causes. And that was at the time of Musa alayhi salam. I mean, this is a big deal. These are the believers. These are the righteous followers of Musa. I mean, these are not random people. Okay? The Prophet, Rasulullah, is in your midst, and you're committing an act of aggression, and you're committing an act of murder against another fellow believer. Like, this is totally unthinkable. Right? This was totally unthinkable. And so everyone took it very, very seriously. And Musa alayhi salam took it very, very, very seriously. And then he instructs them in order for us to know. So again, investigated, asked people around, trying to do the Sherlock Holmes thing, trying to kind of follow the clues, who could have possibly had any interest in terminating this man's life, and they could not find any answers. All right? Al-Qurtubi has an extensive account on this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired Musa alayhi salam. And he said, this is a matter that needs to be adjudicated through divine intervention. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to interfere with his power and might for a reason. I will explain that, in a bit. So Allah said, in order for you guys to ascertain the identity of the murderer, of the person who committed the perpetrator of this crime, you need to slaughter a cow. And then you need to take the flesh of that cow, a piece of that flesh, and you need to strike that man's body with it. Whose man's body? The victim. You need to strike the victim's body with it. The victim will come back to life, and then the victim will be able to testify as to who murdered him. Right? Subhanallah. Now, I want you to imagine Musa alayhi salam and the Israelites, the Hebrews, and the guy that committed the murder. And then Musa alayhi salam himself is telling you, we're going to slaughter a cow. I want to get the flesh of that cow, and we're going to strike this man. That man is going to come back to life, and he's going to testify as to who murdered him. If you are the murderer, what would you do? Like, just to be on the safe side. You know, it's going to happen. With or without your consent, it's going to happen. You're going to be in so much trouble. It's better for you to come clean and to confess and to say, hey, okay, I'm sorry. I did this, and these are the reasons. Whatever. Come up with your own excuses. But it's going to happen inevitably, right? Dude, be smart. Right? He did not. Just zip. Not a word. Part of it is wishful thinking. Part of it is, you know, maybe it'll take him a long time. Part of it, you know, is lack of faith. Maybe this is not all true. You know, maybe Musa is not going to pull this off. You know, whatever it is, people go through their own mental gymnastics when they get in trouble. All right? So the command came to the Hebrews. Slaughter a cow, take a piece of the flesh, and strike the man's body with it. The man will wake up, and the man will testify as to who murdered him. If this happened right now, literally, I'm asking you honestly, like, what would some of you do? You're going to go find what? You're going to go find the cow. You're going to call someone, hey guys, do you have any cows on your farm? Like, do you know, Ahmed, do you know someone that has a cow on his farm? Like, you know, there's farms around us. There's cows, right? You drive in Auburn, there's going to be lots and lots of cows, right? After Fajr, we're going to all get in the car and we're going to drive around and we're going to find the cow. The closest cow to the masjid, we're going to go find it, okay? Now, the leaders of the Hebrew community, how did they respond to Musa alayhi salam? They said to him, أَتَتَّخِذُنَا هُزُوًا? Are you kidding me? That's literally what they said. Are you kidding? That's how. Like, what? Why? How is this going to work? We came to you for help because we lost one of our own, and you're telling us to go slaughter a cow? See? Instead of taking the command of a prophet at face value, the messenger of God said, do this, just do it. Don't ask too many questions, right? They're negotiating and investigating and asking all kinds of questions. Some are relevant, some mostly are not, right? أَتَتَّخِذُنَا هُزُوًا? And Musa alayhi salam, you know, I ask Allah, you know, for protection. I am not one to joke about these very serious matters, all right? So be mindful of what you're saying. So are you serious? You really want us to find the cow? Is that your plan? Yes, that's what Allah instructs you to do. Oh my God, what are we going to do with this? Right? Okay, tell us a little bit more about this cow. Like, what do you mean? Tell us a little bit more about this cow. A cow is a cow. A cow is not a goat. A cow is not a sheep. A cow is not a llama. Right? A cow is... It's just a cow. Have you ever asked that question? Like, have you ever gone to the halal store? What kind of cow is this exactly? Like, do you ever ask that? You know, like, maybe people with extremely, like, sublime taste in their meat and the Wagyu beef and the black Angus and all this stuff. Okay, maybe. But if you try to consume that beef on your own because, you know, you want to enjoy it so much, this has nothing to do with the matter at hand. The matter at hand is... just go find the cow. Does it matter which cow? It doesn't matter. But that's not how they took it. أُدْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ يُبَيِّن لَنَا مَا هِي. Pray to the Lord in order to explain to us what type of cow this actually is. Oh, so you want to make it more complicated on yourselves? All right, I'll make it more complicated on you. Right? You could have taken the command and run with it and did what you're asked to do. But you want to make it complicated. And here, let me ask you this. Did they, and I'm not talking about all the Hebrews, by the way. These are hundreds of thousands of people. I'm just talking about the group that was talking to Musa alayhi salam. Okay? Let me ask you, were they asking all these questions because they were really diligent about finding the right cow? Or were they asking all these questions because they're trying to wiggle out of responsibility? If it is that you are keen, your keenness will drive you to just follow the commands of God as they are without asking any further questions, if you're really keen. But because you're not keen, because they're acting hypocritically, They are trying to ask all these differentiating questions because they're trying to get away from the responsibility. They're trying to, like, what cow? It's impossible to find this cow. And that's what they were eventually trying to do. And I'll show you, right? So, okay, so you want to know what kind of cow it is? لا فارض ولا بكر عوان بين ذلك. Okay, all right, let me give you some qualities of the cow. The cow is not too old, and the cow is not too young, and the cow is of kind of an average age. عوان بين ذلك. All right. You know, farid means old, bikr means like, you know, untouched by a steer, right? And, you know, awanun bayna dhalik, it's kind of like middle-aged cow. How, any of you knows like the average life of a cow? I have no idea. Like, what's a middle-aged cow? Like, you know, is it 12 years? Is it 15 years? I have no idea, right? Neither did they. Neither did Musa alayhi salam. But they chose complexity, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just made matters worse for them. Now, the cow has certain qualities at this point. You know, the cow has to be of middle age. All right? So they come back to to Musa alayhi salam and they said, "Ud'u lana rabbaka yubayyin lana ma lawnuha." Can you pray to Allah to tell us the color of that cow? The color of the cow. Have you ever cared for the color of the cow? Like organic cows, like we ask if it's organic or not, if it's halal or not. But do you ever ask, like, this is really interesting beef, like, what was the color of this cow? Like, you'd never ask that question, right? But they're insincere. They're trying to just make matters worse and complicated, you know, on themselves. Ud'u lana rabbaka yubayyin lana ma lawnuha. Explain to us, what is the color of this cow? Musa alayhi salam is like, literally like, what do I say to these guys? So he turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Lord, I'm sorry. That's what they're asking, okay? I know it's ridiculous, but they're asking for a color. So the color comes down. Safra faqi'un lawnuha. Yellow, and not any type of yellow. Yellow of a very bright hue of yellow. Faqi', like it's so bright, it's almost like you know this the fluorescent yellow almost. Have you ever seen a fluorescent yellow cow ever before? It's getting ridiculous at this point. You know, I think it's almost Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making fun of it. Yeah, find the purple cow. You know, that's the one I'm looking for, right? So no, it has to be like this very bright hue of yellow, almost like fluorescent yellow. Subhanallah. On top of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him a further description. This one they did not ask for, but it was like kind of, you know, he added it free to the package. Tasurru al-nadhirin. Tasurru al-nadhirin. It is so beautiful for the sight. Beautiful for the beholder. Okay, I'm going to ask you this question. It's not a joke. Have you ever seen a beautiful cow, particularly? What does a beautiful cow look like? Tasurru al-nadhirin. Maybe she has Botox or something. Right? Tasurru al-nadhirin. The cow is supposed to be beautiful. So now the cow has to be in middle age. The cow has to be yellow, has to be of a very, very bright hue, and the cow also needs to be so beautiful that it becomes like, you know, a sight to reckon with. ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا ما هي إن البقرة تشابه علينا. Musa, please, can you be more specific? Can you ask the Lord to give us more information? We really don't know which cow this is. This is so difficult. This is so, you're getting unreasonable on us. Guys, I just said to slaughter a cow. You kept asking questions about what the nature of that cow is, and I'm just answering your questions, right? So Musa alayhi salam responds with further qualifications from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see, like when you go too far, you're just going to make matters complicated for yourself. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then said to them, إنها بقرة لا ذلول تثير الأرض ولا تسقي الحرث مسلمة لا شية فيها. Even the Arabs don't know what these words mean, right? It's like it's coming to a point now where it's becoming very, very difficult to even understand how specific those qualifications are. Dhalul means like a broken into, type of cow. A cow that was used to plow the earth, that was used to water the crops, that was used to do labor on the farm. All right? So this cow is supposed to not be dhalul. And dhalul from dhilla, dhilla is humiliation. The cow was never humiliated by hard labor. The cow was never pushed around and mistreated. All right? Was never asked to plow the earth, was never asked to water the crops. تثير الأرض ولا تسقي الحرث. Musallama from salima, meaning does not even have a flaw. Like a flawless cow, like the winner of the cow beauty pageant. Not a flaw in this cow. All right? Musallama, flawless. La shiyata fiha, does not have a single blemish of a different color. Just the bright yellow. Have you ever seen a cow like this? Neither have I. And if you have, let's slaughter it and eat it, because I think this is going to be an amazing cow. Subhanallah. And when things got really, really rough and complicated, that's when the Hebrews said to Musa alayhi salam, Al-ana ji'ta bil-haqq. Enough, please. You've spoken the truth. Now we know exactly what we need to be looking for, right? When they realize that they've gone too far and they couldn't handle it anymore, that's enough criteria for us. We need to start looking for this cow now. Now they have their marching orders, basically. So they keep going around and around and around and around looking for this cow everywhere. The neighboring villages, the neighboring towns. They cannot, obviously they can't find anything like that. In fact, Hassan al-Basri says that most likely, because this cow was not used for farming purposes, it is most likely that this cow lived in the wilderness. But this cow was not even a domesticated cow, right? Maybe. And so they looked at all the farms, they looked at all the souq, all the different markets trying to purchase this cow, and they still could not find it. So they started looking into the wilderness, right? And according to Tabari, he says that there was a particular family. Their father was an elder, and he only had one son. And he had lots of livestock that he lost over the years. So he had only one remaining calf. And this calf looked like it had its own particular qualities. So he told his wife, if I die, this calf belongs to my son. Please keep this calf in the wilderness, away from people's prying eyes. And when my son is of age, tell him where the calf is. And so, the father died, the son comes of age, and then his mother tells him, your father left you this really special cow. So he goes and he finds the cow. He finds this massive, beautiful cow that is perfectly yellow, that is pleasing to the eyes, that does not have a single blemish, that was never used for farming purposes before, free-spirited, unbroken into type cow. And he brought that cow to his farm. And who was arriving at the farm at the time he came in? He said, the delegation of the Hebrews running around trying to find the cow. So they're like, oh my God, that's the cow right there. So they come and they asked him, okay, let's inspect this cow. Oh my God, perfectly yellow, does not have any blemishes. Oh my goodness, did you ever use this cow to do some farming work? Nope, I just got this cow from the wilderness right now. My dad left it for me, right? Investigated the whole thing, and they realized that this is the cow that they actually needed. So they said, we'd like to buy the cow. Hassan al-Basri says that the price of the cow at that time in that community is about 3 dinars. So they tried to offer him 3 dinars. Of course, right? They tried to offer him 3 dinars. And he said, this is going to be a lot more expensive than 3 dinars. This is an heirloom legacy in my family, okay? My father left me this cow. I'm not going to give it to you for 3 dinars. Okay, fine. 3.5. And they started negotiating, all right? Al-Hassan al-Basri says, and actually a lot of scholars, they said that he ended up selling them the cow for 10 times its weight in dinars. So they weighed the cows, And they weighed the dinars and they multiplied it by 10. And that's how much they paid. So they go to Musa alayhi salam, they said they're complaining. He's asking too much for the cow. And Musa alayhi salam tells them, just pay the man whatever he's asking for. So they go back and they finally did a little fundraising, collected money from the entire community, and they purchased the cow and they brought the cow back. And when they brought the cow back, at this point, they started arguing with Musa alayhi salam. Can we just find a random cow and slaughter it? Do we have to slaughter this one? Can we just get another cow? That's too late, Habibi. Khalas. That's it. You have to slaughter this cow. Now, this is an expensive cow. They wanted to keep it as an investment. And then maybe go do what they should have done in the first place, which is get a random cow and slaughter. But obviously, it's become too late at this point. So they slaughtered the cow. They took a piece of its meat. They strike the man with it. The man wakes up and he says, that guy right there is the one that murdered me. So he says, I didn't do it. Literally, a miracle just happened right in front of their eyes. And he's still denying, I didn't do it. And Musa alayhi salam says, did you guys, which part of this exactly was not clear to you? Because the miracle just happened right now. His family started siding with him, and they surrounded him and said, no one is going to touch our son. It's crazy stuff. It's crazy stuff. And Musa alayhi salam eventually convinced them, either you give him up, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will exact his punishment upon every single one of your family. And that's when they gave him up and he was executed for that murder, right? I still did not answer the question. So that's a story. And I still did not answer the question why it was called Surat al-Baqarah. Remember, the task that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed on the shoulder of men and women, the task that was placed on the shoulder of Bani Israel as the founders of a civilization, as the followers of a great faith, the task that was placed upon the shoulders of the Muslim Ummah, right? Remember what I said earlier, is to use a divine directive, a command of God, in order to build a civilization that is constructed with our own human hands, right? That's what I said earlier. All right, now keep in mind, against the backdrop of the story of al-Baqarah, this is a civilization with a shared responsibility, right? Just like every other thing between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a shared responsibility. A little bit of it God does, and a little bit of it we do. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does 99.9% of it, but there's always some piece of human responsibility in the end. Otherwise, Allah will not hold us accountable if we did not make our own choices, right? So this in order for that type of divine civilization, this God-centric civilization to be built, it requires knowledge and surrender. Knowledge of the directive and the nature of the directive and what is it exactly that God wants us to do, followed by surrender to the nature and consequences of that directive. All I need to do is to know what is it Allah wants of me. Not why, not how is that even possible, but rather what. What is it that Allah wants? And once I know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, the next step is to surrender. It's to find a way to actually do it. Okay? Allah gave you a directive that is called the 5 daily prayers. Who's supposed to do the 5 daily prayers? It's us. It's not just a civilization. Everything that you've been commanded to do shares the same exact quality. All right? And this requires us to push ourselves a little bit beyond the limitations of the human mind and the limitations of sense perception, even in times when it doesn't make sense in accordance with my own culture, it doesn't make sense in accordance with my own education, it doesn't make sense in accordance to scientific discoveries and all of that. Sometimes I need to push myself into the metaphysical realm and accept a directive of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not be so materialistic about things all the time, like many of those Hebrews were. This is all weird and superstitious. You're going to slaughter a cow and use its meat and what? How about just use the good old methods of crime investigation and crime scene investigation and stuff like that, CSI stuff. Why are we doing this metaphysical things? Because Allah said so. You have to get that question resolved in your mind and walk through the steps afterwards, right? Number one, does God exist or not? And if God exists, how do I serve Him? And once I know that I can serve Allah through Islam, then every command that Islam brings, I need to accept. If you have a qualm, focus your energy on the first question. You can negotiate and argue with the first question all you want. Your heart needs to feel comfortable with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But once you have and move the second question, how do I serve God? And you've accepted Islam, you cannot then pick and choose. You can't just say, well, this makes sense and that doesn't make sense. You have to take it all as a package, as a responsibility. And sometimes you have to surrender your own sense of reason to God's own sense of wisdom. That's how it works. All right? So we accept that the prophets brought us teachings and injunctions and morals and values and do's and don'ts and spirituality and so on and so forth. And we understand that the Quran brought us a general idea. This is really important. I want you to pay attention. Okay? The Quran brought us a general idea about how to live a good life, a general idea about what morality is, a general idea about what ethics could be, a general idea about how to treat each other and how to treat God. Sometimes the Quran is specific. Theft is haram, murder is haram, zina is haram, you have to pray every day, you have to fast, you have to give your sadaqah. Sometimes it's specific, and we will take the specificity of the Quran. And sometimes the Quran is not specific. Sometimes the Quran provides overall general guidance. Sometimes the Prophet ﷺ provided overall general guidance. Sometimes Musa ﷺ said, slaughter a cow. Are we supposed to ask about the specifics of the cow? No. Are we supposed to ask about the specifics of a hukm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left general? No. If Allah left it general, then we need to accept the generality of that injunction, right? And here's what happens. I want you to listen to this beautiful hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in Bukhari. مَا نَهَيْتُكُمْ عَنْهُ فَاجْتَنِبُوا. If I prohibited you from something, avoid it. Period. That's very specific. Don't do X, Y, and Z. وَمَا أَمَرْتُكُمْ بِهِ فَأْتُوا مِنْهُ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. And whatever I've commanded you to do, do whatever you can. Logical? Right? Here's the third part. فَإِنَّمَا هَلَكَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ بِكَثْرَةِ مُسَاءَلَتِهِمْ عَلَى أَنْبِيَائِهِمْ. Previous nations were destroyed because of all the excessive questions that they used on their prophets. So if the Quran said X, do X. If the Quran said avoid Y, avoid Y. If the Quran is silent about Z, what are you supposed to do? Hey, by the way, is Z halal or haram? What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to automatically assume that it is halal. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remained silent on this particular matter. Rasulullah remained silent on this particular matter. I should not be the one to, kind of stir the water and keep asking questions when the commands were clear. If Allah wanted to be further clear on this matter, He would have been. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to be specific, He would have been. If Rasulullah wanted to be specific, He would have been, right? And that's why, some of you might say, well, where in the Quran does it say the consumption of marijuana is haram, for example? Because Quran only prohibits alcohol, right? Does the Quran prohibit alcohol? Sure, but what is the word that is used? Al-kuhul. That word is not mentioned in the Quran. What is the word that is used for alcohol? Khamr. What is the meaning of khamr? Khamr is a substance that taints your mind. I don't need Allah to say cocaine, heroin, meth, specifically every single one of them is haram. I don't need that because I have one word in the Quran that says khamr. So anything that acts like khamr, that puts a khimar, so to speak, on the mind, that blinds and taints the mind, is haram, right? Is eating donuts halal or haram? Which category is that under? Exactly. And that is, I think, the mistake that many Muslims and followers of religion in general have committed over the centuries. When we don't accept the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we negotiate with them, And when we don't accept the silence, the occasional silence of God in the scriptures, and we keep asking questions and stirring the pot, what ends up happening is that the scholars start responding to these questions. I mean, if no one asked Imam Malik about specifics that are not mentioned in the Quran and the Hadith, Imam Malik would have not volunteered to give answers. And as the scholars are asked questions by people over the centuries, what happens with the answers? The answers are being compiled where? They're being compiled in books of fiqh, and the corpus of Islamic law keeps growing and growing and growing and growing over the centuries until it becomes inaccessible. The average person now, the average Muslim today, has no access to the sources of Islamic law. They cannot ascertain on their own what is halal and what is haram. Why? Because the information is unavailable? No. But because there is this behemoth of legal rulings and injunctions that were produced by the scholars over the centuries that people have to penetrate through in order to get to the sources so that they can find out whether the answer is halal or haram. And the average Muslim now delegates the matter of deciding what's halal and haram to who? To the Imams and the scholars. I bear no moral responsibility. I just need to go to the Imam and ask, because the Imam is the one that's going to answer the questions on my behalf. I have no moral responsibility. Whereas what Surat al-Baqarah teaches you in the story of al-Baqarah is that al-Baqarah is symbolism for these bad habits of thought. It's symbolism for the bad habits of thought. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to build a civilization, a divine-centric civilization that is shared by a divine director and human constructive abilities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants it to be shared between both of us. And in order to enable us to do that, He gave us a set of teachings in the scriptures, in the Quran. Some of those teachings were very specific when He wanted them to be specific. And many of these teachings were very general when He wanted them to be general. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted us then to take our own moral compass and take the teachings into the world and work as hard as possible to build the civilization and cause the earth to thrive and do imaratul ard that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do. What happens is that the moral habit is lost. Muslims don't have the moral habit. They engage in haram businesses. They open liquor stores and they come to the Imam, is it haram or halal to sell liquor? Dude, are you serious? He says, no. Before you judge me, I don't sell liquor to Muslims. I only sell it to non-Muslims. I was like, oh wow, that's amazing. So what you do in life is spread filth and destruction and death and sadness and broken relationships among the non-Muslims that you're supposed to inspire because you're Muslim. Is that what you're doing? Do they know the answer or not? Do they know what they're doing is wrong or not? They absolutely do. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, 99% of the time, when people come to the Imams with questions about fiqh, they already know the answer. It's just the hawa. It's the hawa. It's their own whimsical desires. They want to hear something else from the Imam. And when the Imam doesn't give them what they want, they're going to go to the next guy and the next guy until they find some Imam in Malaysia that will give them the answer that they're looking for. Yeah, sure. You will always find somebody. But what does your heart tell you? And that is why the Prophet ﷺ, in these matters, what does he say in the hadith? Ask the Imam, what does he say? Istafti qalbak. Your heart will always give you the right answer, but you will ignore it. You will ignore it because you don't want to carry the moral responsibility. Because you want to put the moral responsibility on someone. Well, the Imam said it's okay. Do I know more than the Imam? He's the one with the knowledge, right? I went to the scholars and I asked and I said, okay, no, but what you're doing is clearly wrong. I don't care. The Imam said he was right? And when the moral responsibility, when the moral habit is lost, that person cannot build a civilization. You're not inspired. You don't have the right ideas. You don't have the right motivation. You're completely lost. You are the guy that's doing quality control. You're the guy that's tasting the cake. Instead of being part of the process, you're just the guy that is standing on the sidelines, tasting the cake. Surah al-Baqarah wants you to treat every matter in life Like the Hebrews needed to treat the cow. Slaughter the cow, Lord, I listen and obey. And if you gave me details about the cow, I will take the details. If you did not give me details about the cow, I will not ask for details. I will just operate based on my own moral habit. And I will ask my heart, and 99% of the time, inshallah ta'ala, I will reach the right answers. Now you might ask me, wait, like, are you saying don't go to the Imam and ask any questions whatsoever? Like, Imam, we're going to be scared to come to you because you're going to be judging us if we ask you any questions. That's not what I'm saying, all right? That's not what I'm saying. We're not going to be able to fix the habits of the last 1,000 years, in one tafsirah night, okay? So some of you will still need to come to the Imams and ask questions. But number one, you have to come with the right heart, you have to come with the right intentions, and you have to come with the right type of willingness to actually follow. And many of our scholars have actually taught us that. Go to the Imam in order to verify the validity of the source. Imam, is this ayah in the Quran? Okay, great. Can you please explain to me what it means? Very good. Is that the right explanation? Awesome. And then maybe you verify by looking at Tabari and Ibn Kathir and make sure that you understand what the ayah says. Okay, is that hadith sahih in Bukhari and Muslim and one of the great collections? Yes. Now, the responsibility of deriving rulings from the ayah and the hadith falls on whose shoulder? You. Not me anymore, right? You have a business and you're trying to put a business together, and business is complicated and there's finances and there's this and there's that going on. Go to the Imams in order to ask for the sources so that you can look at the sources yourself and verify, so that you're able to reach your own answers, so that you feed your own moral habit. Next time, you don't even need to ask questions. I know it's wrong. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to engage in something that could even potentially taint my income. I want my income to always be halal. I would never even take the risk. There's no point, right? But when people ignore the moral habit, when people treat every Baqarah in the world like the Hebrews treated their cow, right? And they try asking all these questions in order to negotiate, in order to get the answer that they like, in order to be dismissive, in order to manipulate the process, right? Because they have something else in mind. These people, they will never participate in the overall major directives that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to follow from Surat al-Baqarah, right? And that is why, again, sometimes curiosity kills, as they say. The Hebrews were partially curious, but they were okay, let me rephrase. I don't think that it was sheer curiosity. I actually think that it was a negotiation veneered by curiosity. They wanted to negotiate down the ask. The demand is to slaughter a cow. They did not want to do that in the first place. So they're trying to make it complicated so that they wiggle out, right? But it appeared as curiosity. So Surah al-Baqarah, the cow, became a symbol of these bad habits of thought that prevent us from surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that prevent us from developing and cultivating the moral habit that informs of all of our decisions, and most dangerously, prevents us from participating in cultivating the world with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be His trustees on earth, to be His trusted partners, truly, to cause this earth to thrive, and we end up marginalizing ourselves, in that way. Of course, like I said, all the other perspectives on al-Baqarah are admissible and they are valid. Some of you said a lot of cool things last time, but this is what I found to be, quite compatible with the theme of the surah, and the timing of its revelation and the goals that it's trying to achieve. So inshallah, I will take some questions from you guys, and we'll pray maybe Isha in about 10 minutes. And next time, inshallah, I will break down the surah to its categories, and we'll classify the sub-themes of the surah, and we'll start, inshallah, the Friday after. Yes, sister.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum salam.
So, you're talking about the drug, the marijuana, the cocaine, and everything, right? So, but ordinary people not understanding that some of those substances inside of the medication, for instance, to reduce like a pain when somebody has a surgery, or certain kind of illnesses. So what should we do in order not to take that substance that going to poison our body? I mean,
I appreciate your question, and you know it definitely gets into the nitty-gritty of substance and substance abuse and substance consumption and painkillers and so forth. Yeah, yeah, here's the thing. You know, I want to say that most painkillers would do the job of substance. Most. And those painkillers essentially is exactly what they are. They are painkillers. They have nothing to do with the mind. They don't taint your judgment. They don't give you the high, right? So if it just focuses, like ibuprofen is a painkiller, morphine is a painkiller, right? Marijuana, you know, can be used as a painkiller as well. But I have to ask myself, which one suspends my judgment and which one only focuses on the pain? If you take marijuana in particular and break it down into like THC and what's the other one? CBD, right? Yeah, CBD and THC. The THC component is the substance, is the one, you know, that may cause dependence and the one that may cause tainting the mind. The CBD is the one that does not have any of these side effects. And so again, you know, we're smart enough, and there's enough knowledge around us to verify and ascertain and ask the right questions and avoid the things that ultimately, I mean, why do I need to get high? You know, I hear this from people all the time, you know. It really, I don't want to get high. This is just about pain management. Okay, can we find another drug for pain management? Do you have to get high and be completely like stoned? You know, you don't need to go through that. If it's just about pain management, we'll find you something else for pain management. So, you know, if you are keen about the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will always find a way. Having said that, you know, again, even the ahadith themselves, they leave room for exceptions, right? And so, for example, if you are in the middle of the desert and you are about to starve and all you could find is a wild boar, can you consume it or not? Of course. So I still did not have to make that up. I just needed to go back to the original sources and I will find my answer, right? Even when exceptions are allowed, the answer is still embedded in the authentic tradition itself. Sister? Correct. Yeah, yeah. Bani Israel. Mm-hmm.
If we come to the masjid, we have to pray Tahiyyat masjid, right?
Yes.
If there is a khutbah going on or talk, do we have to do the Tahiyyat masjid or listen to the khutbah?
Oh man. Oh man. So okay, I'll give you the milder version of my answer, the version of my answer that would be allowed on the live broadcast, and that is, if you come to the masjid, always come early for Jum'ah. And when you come early for Jum'ah, pray Tahiyatul Masjid, pray your Sunnah, do everything, right? Now, if you occasionally, very rarely, have to come late to Salatul Jum'ah because something major happened and you could not, and it's not just a bad habit that you engage in every single week, but something rarely happened out of the ordinary and you had to be late, don't cut through the lines and walk all the way to the first row and then stand in front of the camera and then pray your Sunnah, okay? Perhaps stay in the very last row, you know, be like against the wall on the sides. If you really, really feel the necessity of praying Tahiyatul Masjid while the khutbah is in session and you're late, make sure that you do that in a manner that is not disruptive to everyone else's Jum'ah experience. You know, because again, what makes us religious? What makes us religious? Is our regard to Allah and disregard for each other? Is that what makes us religious? What makes us religious and devout is our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our love for each other. It's both, right? That's what if it's just our love for each other, then that's just secular love. If it's just our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with disregard for every other human being, that is the dismissive type of love. But what makes us devout is that we honor Allah and His rights, and we honor also the rights of Banu Adam as well, right? حقوق الرب وحقوق العباد. They both have to be honored and respected. And so you cannot honor the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the expense of 50 people that are praying right behind you. They're going like this. And they came early, right? And they prayed their sunnah, and they deserve a little bit better, right? And so I uphold the sunnah of praying tahiyatul masjid during the khutbah. But when you do it, just do it in a manner that does not disrupt anybody else.
I would like to say something.
Yes.
When we were tried, we told us during khutbah you're supposed to select 5 that are listening to the imam. Because actually salat for zuhr is 4 rakat. But right now it's 2 rakat because of the khutbah. Khutbah
Correct.
says it's close to namaz.
Correct.
You're
Correct.
supposed to be very,
Yeah.
sit down and listen.
Dr. Firuzuddin says that because Jum'ah is 2 rak'ahs, the khutbah are in lieu of the first 2 rak'ahs. So honoring the khutbah is literally about you taking care of the first 2 rak'ahs of your dhuhr. And so we have to be very, very diligent about that. I appreciate that. That's definitely valid. Yes.
They call the khutbah wajib,
Correct.
and the tahiyatul masjid is nafil. So wajib is higher than the nafil. That's why it should not be done.
Yeah, and you will see a variation between the madhahib on this matter. There's a hadith, by the way, and this hadith is sahih, where the Prophet ﷺ was giving the khutbah, and in the middle of the khutbah, one of the Sahaba came late, and out of respect, the man sat down right away, and the Prophet ﷺ asked him to stand up. Did you pray tahiyatul masjid? The man said no. He said pray it in the middle of the khutbah. So the Hanbalis and the Shafi'is and others, and some Hanafis, by the way, they take this hadith and they say, well, Rasulullah had this person stand up during the khutbah in order to get us used to the habit of doing tahiyatul masjid. Other scholars say that Rasulullah wanted to identify this man to the crowd, and that after salah, he told them, do you guys remember that this person that I asked to stand up? I want you to help him. It was a means of identification, and it was not meant to be a timeless ruling, so to speak. But again, the scholars have disagreed, about this matter. I personally, if I go to the masjid a little bit late, I will not pray tahiyatul masjid, and I will not pray sunnah. If I am from the musalleen, if I'm from the worshippers, I personally will show respect to the khatib, and I will delay all my nafil until after Jum'ah. You can pray 10 rak'ahs if you'd like, okay? But during the khutbah, don't. But because of this hadith and because of strong scholarly opinions that support it, I'm nobody to dismiss something like this. So I still have to uphold it, but just find a way to do it respectfully.
One more thing.
Yes.
Before that, he said, I heard that the khutbah was after salah. And one of the amirs changed it later on, that khutbah first and salah after that. Is that right?
No. Khutbah was always before.
Most of people after salah, they left the mosque.
And the Prophet ﷺ would actually recite Quran. All the new Quran that was revealed to him, he would recite it during the khutbah, and that was basically the khutbah. And then they would do salah after khutbah. Yeah. I think the disagreement is on the adhan, whether 1 or 2 and all that. Uthman used to do 2 adhans to bring people to the masjid first, and then another adhan to start. Any other questions about Surat al-Baqarah? Yes. Is it about drugs? Okay. You're a nurse. I figured you'd ask him.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, I'm always wanting to know, there's like 3 different timings for the Jumu'ah prayers here, which I appreciate, but since the third Jumu'ah is after, it's actually after.
Right. Right. Yes. So I will answer the question. Since we got into this Jum'ah thing, I don't know how, but it's okay. I'll address that question, inshallah. And sister is asking about the 3 shifts of Jum'ah and the fact that so in the summer, the first shift actually starts and ends before Dhuhr, and in the winter, the 3rd shift starts after Asr, right? So, people often ask the question as to why we do that. And I just, again, first, I want you to assume that we've done our due diligence, making sure that what we're doing is right and defensible, all right? So that's the first point. The second point is, as I was explaining to a group of sisters in a halaqah yesterday night, in the Hanbali madhab, for them, the time of Jum'ah actually starts very early in the day. So that you're talking about, about half an hour after sunrise, like the time of Salatul Duha, all the way to right before Asr. That's the window of Jum'ah for the Hanbalis. And so this is independent of Dhuhr time. So the Shafi'is, for example, or the Hanafis, they would say that, Jum'ah time is the window of Dhuhr. But for the Hanbalis, it starts way earlier. All right? And so we use that opinion in the summer in order to do the first shift and enable people who are not able to come to Jum'ah a little bit later to still do their Jum'ah, right? And the Malikis, for them, Jum'ah time starts from Dhuhr all the way until right before Maghrib. So that is pretty cool. Because we use that opinion in order to offer Jum'ah after Asr sometimes, but then the key here is that you need to have already prayed Dhuhr before that third shift, and then you pray Jum'ah, and then you pray Asr right after. Does that make sense? So you have to have already prayed Salatul Dhuhr. You can't count on Jum'ah when it falls after Asr. And we've explained that, by the way, many, many times. It's just, it's been years we've been doing this, and we can't keep explaining it every single Friday. I think it's just going to become a broken record. Yes?
It's very comforting what you said right now, because in my country, people have a belief that because we are Hanafi, so we are not allowed to follow any practices from Hanbali or Maliki. Or if you want to do that, to do Maliki, then don't do anything else.
Stick to it.
Yeah, stick to it.
Yeah.
So this is very
Yeah.
comforting.
Yeah, I mean, remember, we're also dealing with a very diverse community and people who come from all walks of life and all persuasions. So we have to be mindful, but we also have to keep in mind that we are a Muslim minority that lives in a Western country. And some people literally will go on years and years and years, and they are incapable of praying Jum'ah. Literally. Especially the students. Like, I know students that would go on from, maybe once they go to school, all the way until they graduate high school, they've never done Jum'ah except in the summer. That is unacceptable. So we had to find a way to still encourage people, to come a little bit early, come a little bit late, do your Jum'ah, right? Don't joke around with Salatul Jum'ah. That's for many people, for most people, that is their only contact with Islam. So it is not something that we can compromise. So I hope that answers your question, sister. Yes?
Final question. What I got from your statement of Surah al-Baqarah, it's like almost when I won't name a specific name I told them, but when you deal with kids, like, go get me a shoe, right? They'll say, where is it? Where in the closet? Where in the closet? Right here in the
Which
closet.
one?
Which one?
Yeah.
Do you want both of them or do you want one of them? I think that what you're saying indirectly with this Surah al-Baqarah is that, I don't want to speak for Allah, but what I get from it is that don't make the religion complicated. Follow the basics.
Yes.
Do what you need to do. The day you make it overcomplicated is the day you lose.
Essentially, that's exactly what it is. That is exactly what it is. When Rasulullah says in the hadith, put the right hand on the left hand in your salah, just do it. Just put the right hand on the left hand. Wait, like, how many inches above the belly button do I need to put? Why? I understand that sometimes people do it out of keenness. And they really want to please God, but they end up really putting themselves in hardship. And it becomes complicated. And then they have to go to the scholars. And then they have to ask Abu Hanifa, where do I put my hands? So Abu Hanifa has to give him an answer. I mean, he's not going to just ignore them. And then the books of fiqh keep building up. And as they build up, they become inaccessible. So now fiqh is delegated to the scholars. The average Muslim can't read it anymore because it's so complicated. There's so many different opinions. I mean, you guys just asked me right now about Jum'ah. Right? Do you see like the diversity of these opinions? And it becomes so complicated for the average Muslim. So, Brother Bilal.
and base your decision on just an ayah or hadith, a lot of people, they may come to the wrong conclusion, and we see what's happening in the Muslim world sometimes. They take one hadith literally, they dismiss all the rest of the hadith or the ayah, and they, they come up with their new interpretation of this.
But see, brother, what I'm saying is that you can only do that with a healthy moral habit. If the moral habit is not cultivated, you're going to be looking for the whimsical answers. But if you have the moral habit, the answer may seem insufficient to you. So you're going to do further research. You're going to ask someone else. You're going to look at the next ayah and the previous ayah. You're going to look at 25 other ahadith. But the point is, I think that we need to teach our children to be diligent about verifying the answer that truly makes you feel right in the heart. If the Imam says X, but in your heart you feel the opposite, that's not an excuse. Go and ask other Imams, but not with the intention of getting the answer that I like, but with the intention of getting the answer that feels and sounds right to me. And ultimately, if you ask the scholars, they would say, the Ummah has always been able to find that answer. There is a near ijma' in every generation. Like we've never, لا تجتمع أمتي على ضلالة in the hadith, right? So the Ummah will never build consensus around something that is unrighteous. So we're still protected. Like we will never all veer off into a bad direction. Some of us will, and some of us will continue to do. But it's not because the lack of evidence, it's because they follow their hawa. And that is not something that you can fix, unfortunately. Yes?
So thank you for explaining that story. About the cow, you explained really well about bringing imagination for us to bring the cow, how the cow and everything. So, my question is just in curiosity, not anything. So why that man killed him, the man who victim, did he die again or what happened?
He died again. He died again. Yes, yes. He was resurrected just to mention the name of his murderer, and then he died. Yeah. Yes. Alaikum salam.
This is the story about the Hebrews and the Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Hebrews, they come across a very interesting community.
As a what?
As a very interesting community.
Uh-huh.
A part of them is highly dedicated to the cause. A section among them is always, they are procrastinating on the commandments of Allah. Asking questions and questions that don't even matter. So, like in this case, there was some group of people who asked questions about what color of the cow, about the color of the cow, about the nature of the cow, and all the other features of the cow. But on the other hand, there's a highly committed group of people who will go across the globe, to go above and beyond to find that cow, and then they pay hefty amount to get the cow because the Prophet commanded to get the cow. So I feel like there's in every healthy community or in every community that's kind of growing, it's the price of the stability of the some
Will cost everyone else.
is paid by the community. So,
Right. No, I do agree 100%. And the Quran is actually quite nuanced in its treatment of the Hebrews in general. The Quran would say, وَمِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ مَنْ إِن تَأْمَنْهُ بِقِنْطَارٍ يُؤَدِّهِ إِلَيْكَ. Some from the people of the book, if you entrust them with a ton of gold, they will return the trust. Right? So it upholds that some of them are righteous, some of them are trustworthy. These are the same people that crossed the Sinai with Musa alayhi salam. Some of them, ate from built the calf, the golden calf, but some of them did not. Some of them listened to the Samaritan, and some of them did not. Some of them were punished. 40 sanatan yatihuna fil ard, 40 years they will wander the earth aimlessly, but many of them did not. Some of them entered Palestine with Prophet Joshua. كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة. That was said about the Jews. right? And so the Quran is extremely nuanced. Sometimes it identifies bad behavior and identifies good behavior. And as a Muslim, you should never allow yourself to make, undue generalizations about people in general. Like that is illogical, and it's certainly un-Islamic to do something like this. All the Jews are this, and all the Mexicans are that, and all the blacks and all. Generalizations are always wrong, 100% of the time. Because if they are right about a particular group of people, then God created them this way, therefore they cannot be held accountable. That's how God made them, right? And if God did not make them the way they are, then they have made their own personal choices, in which case you judge the individual behavior, on its own merit, rather than, guilt by association type deal. But there is still a lesson about Banu Israel, about the Hebrews, because they were destined for greatness. They were destined to be God's own people, right? They were meant to have this incredible role on this earth. And so they are always used in the Quran as that example. Don't repeat the mistakes of the Hebrews. Don't repeat their mistakes. If you repeat their mistakes, you will end up losing your position of leadership in the world like they did. Okay? That's why this is the most oft-repeated story in the Quran. Because every time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Banu Israel, He's really intending to talk to us. He's intending to talk to us through the story of Banu Israel.
But it has to do with this fact that generally the Jews are very, very talented people and very high achievers.
I guess per capita speaking, I think I agree with you. But again, sometimes discrimination goes both ways. So it's either you discriminate by saying this entire group is stupid, or you discriminate by saying this entire group is extremely intelligent, right? It is like reverse discrimination. I still think that some Jews are capable of great success. Some of them are capable of invention. They're very intelligent, for the most part. But we've also seen Jews that have committed atrocious crimes. We've seen Jews that were thugs, that joined gangs. We've seen Jews in Palestine that are hurting Muslims, for horrifying reasons. And so you see the good and the bad in every community. But I do agree with you that per capita, the percentage of high achievers in the Jewish community is definitely higher than most other communities. So statistically, that is correct. Any other questions?
Last question.
Yes.
About Baqarah.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the spiritual important for Jewish people or not?
Which one?
The cow itself. Like
No,
when
no,
they
it did
statue
not.
of cow and still they think something is buried under the Quds.
Actually, this is
Anything?
a good question. Where is this story taking place? Where is it taking place? This story is taking place in Sinai. It took place after the Exodus and before they entered Palestine. So they've already left Egypt, they've crossed the sea, and now they're in Sinai, but they have not crossed into Palestine yet, because Musa alayhi salam actually died before they crossed. So this is happening in the Sinai. All right? Now, the story of the calf, have you ever asked yourself, why did they build a calf? Like, why the cow? What is the symbolism of the cow? Where does the cow come from? Who was worshiping it? Where does the cow comes from? Comes from Egypt. That's symbolism of the Egyptians. That is ancient Egypt. Okay? I can't speak for the Hindus, that long ago. I don't know if that would be amazing if they've been doing it ever since. That'd be crazy. No, that was one of the gods of Egypt. And so it's almost like the Jews were rubbing shoulders with the Egyptians for so long. They've adopted their culture. They've appreciated their food. They've developed reverence for their deities. And so asking them to slaughter a cow was a big deal, because a cow, even though it's not sacred for them, but it represents a sacred history that they grew up with. And so I don't know, though, if that was intentional. in the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not? That's an incredible question. Actually opens up another area of research here. Any other questions? Yes. Well, yeah.
So in order to like strengthen our kind of moral kind of code or kind of like that element, would it be best for us to just focus more so on like observing like our scholars, those who may have kind of like perfected or kind of great in that area? So I think it's easy to seek out the knowledge and kind of like follow like what we're taught, but I do find it's kind of harder to like really learn how to like measure your heart against like what I guess what it should be.
Right. So Brother Joseph's asking, how do I enhance or cultivate my moral code? And the answer is actually much simpler than you think. The moral code is already there. It exists in our heart innately. Objective morality is built into our fitrah. It is already there. It's just masked. It's masked by dirt. It's masked by experiences. It's masked by shirk. It's masked by haram. It's masked by culture. Right? What you really need to do, not acquire morality externally, but to introspectively discover the moral code that already exists inside. Just keep, pressure washing it and removing the dirt until it shows up. And one of the ways to do that is by, staying with good company. وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُم in Surat al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, stick yourself with those who are in constant remembrance of God. And so this will only help you uncover what is already there. This is not about an acquisition of something, like I said, an outside moral data that is supposed to come in, but rather about discovering what is already inside. We are built to know what is right and what is wrong, naturally. It's just we mask that. It's like the fitrah of every newborn is born in a state of Islam, and it is their parents that will mask that fitrah with their ritual and their, religious practices and so forth. Yes.
So Surat al-Baqarah is mentioning the struggle of Sayyidina Musa with the Jews to figure out the cow and the questioning that is happening about the cow and not following, the rule from the beginning as if you just need to slaughter a cow instead of going through all
Right.
the steps. So it's the Jews as examples, but in our world, it's like there is a lot of questioning about so many ahkam, so many rules that are in the Quran. Like the example of the interest, the riba, and that is like in a clear and not like that it's haram and all that. But the scholars, the people, the business, everything is turning around and around the same thing, and then they're trying to figure out things. So how is that, possible? Like, even though it mentioned clearly in the Quran that it's not.
Because it is possible because human beings are entitled to make their own choices. It is possible because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them the right to decide for themselves. Hence, there is heaven and hell. So you have to make your own choices and you have to make your own decisions. In the face of evil, you as a Muslim have to do something about it.
So many banks now, we're offering things and this. What formula did they use to go around that hukum from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is not?
Because they think it's going to be financially more favorable. So if they can get a half a point less from conventional lending, they'll do that. And they will go find someone that gives them a fatwa, and they'll just go with it. And so, again, it's clear to you, it's clear to me, it's also clear to them. But they choose to silence and muffle the voice in the heart in order to do something that they know might be wrong because of expediency, because it brings some immediate gain for them, and they disregard the hereafter. We're not perfect, sister, right? We're all sinners, and when we sin, it's not that we forgot that it was wrong. We still know that it is wrong, but there is a passion that made us overcome the pain that comes with guilt and remorse. So in that moment, we find a way to numb the pain. And we find a way to forget about the pain of remorse in order to do something like that. But it doesn't mean that we've lost our moral sense. It doesn't mean that we've lost the definition of what's right and what's wrong. We still do know. But we choose consciously to violate that because, whatever, it feels good. Because it's pleasurable. You know that gossip is wrong. How often, did you sit with other sisters and there was gossip going around? I'm not saying you're gossiping. Yeah, I'm just saying like it happens. Even guys, right? Even guys. All of us know that backbiting is wrong, but we sit in these gatherings and we engage in it. Does that mean we've lost our sense of right and wrong? No. But in that moment, it was pleasurable. It was exciting. I did it because I got a chief laugh out of it. So that is why we commit sin at the end of the day. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala acknowledges this. I just want us, if we start with ourselves at least, and our own families, and we teach our children not just how to pray, but what the meaning of prayer is, and what it actually does to you and to your life. And to teach the children to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not just to obey Allah, but to love God, so that worshiping God becomes a natural, the least I can do in order to honor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so these Muslims that you're talking about that try to find a way around responsibility, I think they were just not taught that the amana is placed on your shoulders, not the sheikh that you asked.
I'm saying I'm talking about these banks and these institutions and they're offering, they're saying it's acceptable. I mean, how did they go around the hukm the clear rule that if we...
They found a scholar that gave them the go-ahead.
All following them, and they were trying to find a way how to do things in life. But still, is it clear with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No.
It's puzzling. I do agree with you. It is a puzzle. Yeah, and we experience that every other day. Yes, sister. This will be your last question, you guys. I'm sorry. We have to pray Isha, okay? Yes.
So basically about conventional loan, about buying a house. I know some Muslim I'm helping to help people, which is like something like a very confused economy in the country. So they're looking for the joint interest to buy a house. I said that I don't see any joint interest in this country to buy a house because that is quite going to be really expensive. You have to pay cash. There's no such installment that way. And then also that they want us to pay interest because they want to make money in order to pay for the employee. And so how could we help people like that?
That is a deep question that is going to require lengthy conversations on our part, and maybe one of those evenings, inshallah, if the opportunity presented itself, I will talk about. Actually, riba is mentioned in Surat al-Baqarah, so we'll probably get to it at some point or the other, inshallah. But unless you guys want to stay until midnight, I don't think we can address that question tonight. So inshallah, maybe at some point we will. Jazakallah khair, subhanak Allahumma bihamdik, shadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر الإنسان لفي خسر الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات تواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Inshallah, we're going to pray in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.